The NCAA. Even if you don't like sports, you have heard of it or you've seen its logo. The NCAA is short for the National Collegiate Athletic Association, and it's the organization that looks over athletes that compete in over 1,000 institutions and conferences across the country. Currently, there are over 460,000 student athletes that compete for the NCAA. You may have friends, family, or know someone that is a college athlete, and paying them can be the difference between them having to skip a meal and them being able to save for the future and become financially stable. I spent hours looking over this topic in order to learn more about it, and that's why I feel like I'm credible to speak on this issue. My job in this speech is to persuade all of you to think differently on this topic, because many people believe that the best thing to do is for colleges to pay their athletes, but today I would like to address the various reasons why the NCAA should not pay its athletes. And the first thing I'll do is give the opposing view of why colleges should not pay their athletes, and then I'll counter that with reasons, or they should pay their athletes, and then I'll counter that with reasons why colleges should not pay their athletes, and lastly, I'll discuss things you can do if you disagree with the current policy. And so, to start off my speech, I'll talk about why some people believe it is better to pay college athletes. And most people believe that it's better to pay college athletes because it is the fairest thing to do in terms of finance. Just think about it. If you pay college athletes, they can buy whatever they want. They can get food, clothing, and even pay for utilities, which are the staples and essentials to living in college. And according to Court Gaines, a writer for the BusinessInsider.com, on October 9, 2015, he wrote an article in favor of paying college athletes in which he said that the total revenue was of the top schools for the NCAA last year was $145 million, yet they only spent $12 million on scholarships. His point was that it's unfair of how much money they make off the athletes, yet they only spend a small portion on them. And according to Steve Siebold, a writer for the Huffington Post, on October 13, 2014, he said that paying college athletes right now is the best thing to do because it will give those who fail to be recruited by the pros more time and hopefully gives them a little savings in the bank to work with. Both of these writers were saying that you should pay college athletes because it would compensate them from all the hard work they've done throughout the entire season. Also, another reason I believe you could pay college athletes is because it would raise the competitive spirit among all school sports, which in the end makes everyone better. So once again, paying college athletes could be a great idea because we could help them become financially stable and maybe save money for the future. But next, I'll discuss why this is actually not a great idea. And the two reasons I believe that colleges should not pay their athletes is because it creates a domino effect of inequality and it would literally create a social hierarchy. According to Court Gaines and Mike Milliman, writers for the BusinessInsider.com, on November 24, 2017, they said that the bigger issue would be with complying with Title IX, which is the law that prohibits schools from discriminating based on gender. So if, for example, if a college starts paying their football players, then they'd certainly be required to give the same benefits and opportunities to all their athletes as well. So basically, you'd have to pay all the athletes. You can't just pay one sports team. You have to pay all the men's teams and all the women's teams as well. And according to Shabazz Napier, a former college basketball player for UConn, on April 7th, 2014, in an interview, he stated that we do have hungry nights where we don't have enough money to pay for food. Although I don't think you should stretch it out to hundreds of thousands of dollars because a lot of times guys don't know how to handle themselves with money. And his point was that he doesn't even want a salary, he just wants enough money to pay for food, which I actually don't disagree with, and I'll talk about in main point 3. But I think the more interesting point is that he says he doesn't even think kids his age or even fellow teammates are mature enough to utilize this money effectively. And another reason I believe you should not pay college athletes is because it can create instability among team members. Just imagine the star player getting paid more than the bench player. Well, obviously the bench player doesn't play as much as the star player, but the bench player is just as much as part of the team as the star player. Also, it brings up an interesting question of what if a player is injured or not performing well? Once you start paying people, it becomes sort of like a job. So is it fair to just fire them because they're not living up to your expectations? And according to Sports US Today, American sports magazine, at the end of 2016, they collected the financial data of the NCAA in terms of total revenue and total expenses. Here's the top 10 list of the top 10 schools in terms of money. Obviously, they make a lot of money, but they also spend a lot of money. And the key point here is that they have a surplus of money. But if you look at Cal State Fullerton, down at the bottom, we do make $16.5 million, which obviously is a lot, but we also spend all of it. So the point is that we don't have a surplus like the bigger schools, which unfortunately also means we can't pay college athletes even if we wanted to. Overall, I think it's more beneficial to not pay collegiate athletes because of all the uncertainty and inequality that can arise from doing so. And finally, I'll explain what everyone can do to contact the NCAA on this issue. And if anyone has strong feelings on this topic, then there are several things you can do to get involved. No matter where your stance is, you can go to change.org, where you can sign or post petitions to help instigate change or tell the NCAA how you feel. I personally do not believe that college athletes should be given a salary, but they should be given a small amount of money in order to pay for food and other living expenses. I would suggest starting a program sort of like putting extra money on the Titan card, in which people or athletes can go to restaurants on campus and even use it at the cafeteria. And even though the overall problem can't be resolved, a small solution like giving extra money for athletes will ensure that they stay in good health throughout the entire season, and this is a good step in the right direction. And now that I've given both sides of the argument, it's time to conclude my speech. So I began by explaining why colleges should pay their athletes, and that's because it is the fairest thing to do in terms of money. But then I refuted that by giving reasons why colleges shouldn't pay their athletes, and that's because of inequality and uncertainty that could lead to it. And lastly, I gave a call to action to anyone that wanted to contact the NCAA in order to change the policy. So the purpose of my speech was to persuade and convince everyone that the best thing to do was to not pay college athletes. With all that said, let me leave you with this thought. Why can't we go back to the way sports used to be? Well, it was all about the game and how it was played instead of the money. Thank you.